Hi, I'm George the Antique Nomad. Come with me as I wander the country in search of valuable vintage, amazing antiques, and cool collectibles. We'll buy, sell, and trade at antique malls, shops, and shows, estate sales, flea markets, thrift stores, anywhere people go to find really interesting things that just aren't made anymore. So come on, let's go! Hey, it's George, and I'm in Florida at Renninger's Antique Extravaganza. This happens 3 times every year, January, February, and November, and it is the 3rd weekend. It's just huge. I participate every time, and it's just great. So let's go take a look. I drive all the way from Seattle to get here, but I'm not the one who comes the farthest. These people actually send all of this stained glass over on ships from England. They have a really great supply. There's pieces as little as $35 wholesale to dealers, so anybody can buy. And there's some really beautiful things that came out of houses built between about 1890 and 1920. And then we're going to swing across here and see our neighbor who has a ton of Christmas. She specializes in it. She looks all over the eastern seaboard for it all year long and then brings a big pile down every November for this show. She also sells patio furniture and nautical items, as you'll see. And then over the nativity scene is my tent awaiting unwrapping. Everybody's just getting ready to open for today. I'm going to take a little bit of time to show some of the stuff that's coming out, and then we'll do some follow-up videos so you'll get a real view of this show because it is huge. Behind me you'll see a really cool bell and a bunch of Christmas stuff. A lot of people bring that out for this show. But let's flip the camera and see what else there is. So you'll see a field full of tents below us, and a lot of folks are just starting to get open. We have something like 1,300 different antique dealers. There's also a big flea market up the hill, so if you're looking for high-end antiques or thriftable, repurposable stuff, is all here. This is a pretty amazing, huge show. We're going to show you what's open this morning, and then we'll come back later and show you stuff after more people get open, including myself. I just wanted to take a little walk around while we had a chance because it will get very busy here and be hard to film later. There's a pretty cool balance scale, and behind it a really nice Francoma vase, one of the turned throne looking pieces that we don't see very often. Piece of Russell Wright, some enamel French cookware. Looks like French and Belgian, actually, probably some Descoware. Nice L.E. Smith swung vase here. And you look up the hill, there's dealers all the way up the hill. Above that is the flea market. There's a side field here that's got a bunch of stuff. We'll walk in here and take a look at what they've got. It looks like there's some fun, interesting stuff down here. I see signs, prints, and a slot machine, and a bunch of cool stuff. So let's take a look around here. Now again, this is mainly an antique show, but there is a mix of old and new, so there's going to be some stuff you'll recognize on both ends. Look at this huge pile of lunchboxes here. These are the old metal ones from the 60s, 70s, and 80s. You've got everybody from Family Affair to Rambo and Raggedy Ann and Superman. That's the Margot Kidder and Christopher Reeve version. Welcome Back Kotter from the 70s, Pac-Man from the 80s. There's an old Lost in Space. You've got the Archies down there, Johnny Lightning. So pretty cool selection. In fact, they've got all sorts of that era of toys and wheeled vehicles and cool stuff like that. A box full of hood ornaments. These interesting handmade wooden Popeye and olive oil cutouts are kind of cool. Here's a whole bunch of car emblems, and a lot of these sorts of things, some of these are dealers who come from up north, and so they save this stuff all year for these shows and for the Florida show season. And then some of it also is stuff that comes from estates down here, especially when you see space toys. There's a lot of interest in space toys in Florida, obviously because of the NASA influence. These are both 1950s era. I see a $200 price tag on one. And you know, space toys are pricey. And then a little bit of paper. It gets kind of moist out here, so a lot of folks don't bring paper, but these folks have photographs and scrapbooks and things like that. So kind of interesting. Old U.S. Naval Hospital emblem there. That's kind of cool. I get to come back and shop at some point, but I've got to sell first so I can make some room in the car, because I brought a full load as well. Another space toy, very Florida, the rocket bank here. This is a 50s piece. You pull this back and it shoots the coin into that slot up in the top there. Always thought those were a lot of fun. Then a bunch of Petroliana here too, so tins and cans and tube repairs and all sorts of fun stuff to decorate a garage.
I used to use it when I used to set up inside, because I got
some of those are full, but I imagine that that's not something people would necessarily want to use, just more to look at. Stereo equipment, like I say, this is a big antique show, so more mid-century toys, Annie, Mickey Mouse, Gunslinger target shooting set, and Rock'em Sock'em Robots. Boy, that was a popular game when I was a kid. These big old clown shoes look like something Bozo would have worn, and maybe did, because there were a lot of people who represented Bozo in events all over the country, and so there were many Bozos, and they would have had to have many shoes. And then at the same time you'll see artistic things, sculptural pieces, wooden pieces. This telescope is a pretty neat looking thing. I have a small version of that, but wow, I like the big one on the tripod, so that's pretty neat. Old lightning rod here. This has got a nice blue Delphite ball on it. The blue is a little harder to find, and when you see the patterns, this is what makes weather vanes more desirable, is a good glass ball on them. Old Coca-Cola and Texaco signs. More Coca-Cola in the back. There are a lot of large and proppy things that can be used for decorating or repurposing here. But then there's little things like pocket knives. There's a bunch of various types of case knives in this case. These old marker lights and ship's lights are pretty desirable now. We see stamp machines quite a bit. These seem to be coming out of post offices now that you can get stamps at the grocery store and places like that. You don't really see stamp machines around very much anymore. But they are interesting for stamp collectors, and they're just cool looking. A lot of patriotic people like them too, because they've got that red, white, and blue going on. On the right is a clock that somebody made that looks older than it is, but on the left is an old French clock from the 1930s, and that's a very sweet Art Deco design. I like the face quite a bit personally. Breweriana. These are Remington statues. They're more recent vintage, but a lot of people are collecting those because original work by Remington is so expensive and mostly in museums and high-end collections at this point. Another good Coke sign. There really are a lot of good signs here this time. Got the Anco wiper blades. I always feel so badly for the slow children. If only they were faster. But that is a really cool sign. And then these folks have a general line of all sorts of stuff. A lot of people come in RV and sell out of their RV all winter in Florida. This is a cool piece. They've taken an old expandable trolley and turned it into a glass table. It's priced at about $250, and that's what we usually see on these when they're repurposed like this, a couple $100. Very clever use of an old thing that might have gone by the by in the old days, but now people really are much more inventive about finding new ways to use old pieces. So that's a pretty cool thing. Old industrial lights. These crazy little fans that are an ottoman you can sit on were really popular in the 50s and 60s, and especially down here in Florida. I had never actually seen one of these before I came here. So that's an interesting piece. And then we've got some old spotlights. Again, very popular. A lot of people like to adapt these for use as indoor lighting now. So those are cool things. And then we've got a field here with a lot of fun stuff. There's a lot of duck decoys, some old corbels and cornices, license plates, glass floats, oars and paddles. How are you today? Good. Antlers, So if you're looking for anything that's big and showy and decorative for a house, or to do some sort of a project or an installation at a store or that sort of thing, Renninger's is really a popular place to find that kind of thing because there's a lot of dealers who bring it here. Look at the crazy dolphin sink. We do find things in Florida that we just don't see in other parts of the country. It was actually made in Canada, but obviously it has a very Floridian vibe to it with the dolphins, and I think that's actually pretty cool. I'd say it's probably 1980s or 90s vintage, which isn't wildly old, but where are you going to find another one if they're not still making those things? Here's a really groovy 50s chair. Very interesting design with the open work on the back and the pads. I wish they had a whole set. Lucite stand. We see a lot of lucite in Florida. It's very popular here because it's light and airy and because it stays well in the weather. One thing you have to be aware of if you're a snowbird down here is when you leave your place for 6 months, if you don't keep the climate control well, things get funky. So a lot of people like plastic and chrome and glass because of that. 1930s era aluminum ware. This is a really nice display of it here actually. You have sets and things that you don't always see. You've got the canister sets. You've got a lot of trays with the stamped designs in the bottom. These were mostly made in America in that era. A lot of this went out of production during the Second World War because it was aluminum and they needed it for the war effort. So you see a lot from the 30s and then some from the 50s, and then it kind of went out of style. It's coming back in style now because the prices are not high for what it is. You know, $15 or $20 for a nicely hammered tray, $25 for the butter dish. You're going to see as little as $5 on some of these pieces. So it's an inexpensive thing to collect that is old and really fits these color schemes that we're seeing in houses now. All of this gray and white painted and soft cool tones, and this aluminum ware goes really well with it. So it's an area that we're starting to see real interest in again. On the other hand, if you like Hollywood Regency, you'll see a lot of that down here too. These gold mirrors are quite ornate from the 50s, 60s, and 70s, and a good example of that. Also something we see in Florida. This is fun because this is popsicle stick art. It's a form of folk art. It's 1950s and 60s era. Took a long time to put something like that together, so people don't really do that anymore. And so we're finding collectors for it. That particular one was priced at $35, and that's a pretty decent price for them, actually. There's a bar in St. Petersburg that has probably 20 or 30 of those up in its above the bar, and it's really cool to look at. There's another big spotlight. So for the time being, I'm going to go back to my booth and get open because there are starting to be people here and we are here to sell, but I'll go around later. We'll just keep adding to this until we have a good view of this whole show for you. So I will sign off for now after we take a look at this nice Venetian glass display here. I think this will be a good place to leave off for the time being, and then we will come back and show you more. So here's my little corner of the world, and I am here at Renninger's. This is Space 4090. This is where I always am, and I'll show you a little of what I've got while we have a moment. It's been really busy, but I have a moment where I can take a break and show you some things. Lots of costume jewelry. The Fenton lamp is a piece from the late 60s that's kind of hard to find. Nice Art Deco clock. I've got the lucite purse. If you've followed some of my other videos, you can see me buy that piece at Collector's Carnival in Indiana. And nice Art Deco clock. Several Lalique pieces here. The pen set is something that we see sell around this time of year for the holidays, and those actually have gold nibs. So there's some interest there. And then we brought coinage, a little bit of Alaskan, believe it or not, and we've sold quite a bit, much to my surprise. There is a market here in Florida for those sorts of things because I think they're just very different to people here, and also because people come from all over to visit here this time of year. Lots of sterling turquoise jewelry, a little bit of check. There's some Cebus figures, Satsuma vase pair. Lots of fun little things. I've got the nudie cards in there, the art studies, which were also in a previous haul video, and cigarettes, the unfiltered before they had the Surgeon General warning. I've got a harmonica on the right there. That was in a haul video you saw in Kentucky. This is the first time it's come out for a show. Lots of interesting, odd little things. This little baby girl license plate I thought was really cute and not something I'd seen before. And I like how they emphasize it's the state of matrimony, so everything's okay. The owl on the left there is a 1930s German perfume lamp. You would actually have holes in the base, and then the heat from the lamp would actually cause, you'll see it here too, you put a little perfume on the light and it would actually diffuse out of the holes in the bottom, and that's how you would get your scent into the room. One nice thing about it being a little dimmer today is that I think you can actually see how the 3D flash view works on this piece. There's Jesus in Ascension, so it goes from the crucifix to Ascension just at the angle. Those were really popular in the early 60s, and I haven't had one to sell in a long time, so that was exciting. I did bring a little Western, and there's some pieces here. These are Alaskan. The red color there you see is actually seal gut, so these are older pieces back when they actually used all the parts of the animal in that way. And also brought some of the Oaxacan black pottery and sold a couple of pieces of that, so that was fun. And then we have a birch bark basket, as well as some of our Northwest native. I brought birch bark and some of these other pieces that are from I believe the Midwest. And then this piece here is unusual. This is Paiute, this cradle board, and it actually was done so that they could shove this into the ground and actually give shade, because these are the natives of Northern California and out in the desert. So that's an unusual piece with the blue ticking in use. This fabric that you see here, that tells us that this piece is from the 1930s. So some other things that I brought to this show, because we always look for variety since we get people from all over the place, include a neat mahjong set with the bamboo and bone tiles. This is 1920s, and you'll see the tiles look like so. And they are bone, not elephant ivory, which makes it legal to sell. You can tell by the little flecks in there. Elephant ivory has a herringbone pattern, and this has little dots that you can see, so that makes it legit. And the other thing that's kind of interesting about this one is it came with the original rules, and it was called mahjong, but it was also referred to as mahjok. And this is going to be from the early 1920s. In the 1920s, it was a huge mania to play mahjong. There were parlors in the arcades, like in St. Petersburg, Florida here, where people would come down on vacation that were given over to playing mahjong. People would spend hours doing it. It was quite a phenomenon in the 20s. And there are a lot of people who still play these days, particularly on the East Coast it seems to be well known, but there are people who play it all over. The book and that piece in that condition probably worth like $175 to $200. This one is Joan of Arc, pair of cast iron bookends. I was happy to see those. I always like cast iron bookends, especially if I get them reasonably and can sell them for under $40. They always seem to go. And then this little guy here is a razor bank. You could use him as a regular bank, but there's no hole in the bottom, which tells you he was actually meant to put your safety razor blades in when you used them. Bunch of cool little bottles here. I showed you these in a haul video. You can go back and look. These were with me in Kentucky, and I brought about half of them down. And then this is a nice German calligraphy set from the 1930s, and it's got the wax stamp, the lead holder, the letter openers, and a dip pen, so it'd be nice for a calligrapher now. And then, because we had rain yesterday, we have a tent up, so it's a little darker under here, but we did bring a bunch of Disney and other related ephemera. And this nice 1930s chenille blanket with the bow knot is an unusual piece. And then here we have Blenko glass, Italian glass, Viking glass, a really nice selection of art glass pieces. And this is a big collection that came out of Washington State, and I had the pleasure of bringing it here. It's funny, I used to come to Florida to buy Blenko to take to Washington. Now I'm buying it in Washington and taking it to Florida. It's very popular everywhere now. This pattern here, I have a few pieces here and several in stock. This is Metlox, and they did the freeform, the contemporana, mobile, various patterns. It's all the same sort of Atomic era squiggle, but the coloration is different depending on the pattern, as you see in this piece. There's no one that's more popular than the other. They all sell very well. This is a lensometer. This would have been something used to make eyeglass lenses, and this is a 1930s piece from American Optical. Old scientific equipment is pretty collectible these days, so that's a fun piece for us to have as well. Also brought a collection of dolls to this show. We do see that there's a lot of interest in dolls. The Polygon doll here was done around the time of the movie by the German company Gund, and this would have come out about 1960, right when the movie did. And then here we have laying together an old Simon and Halbig head, I believe it is, on an earlier body. That's to the right. Because it's a little bit as is and the body isn't really the correct one for it, the head's where the value is. Probably should sell in the $85 to $100 range. And then the Miss Revlon with her extra clothes in her box is worth about $125 approximately. We've got this piece here, this dummy grenade from 1964, the practice grenade that they would not let me take on the airport in Evansville, Indiana. And I guess I understand why, because it isn't a bomb, but it sure looks like one. We've got a little bit of Floridiana here. A lot of the Floridian pieces sold right away, but we still have some really cool Panthers. I got a kick out of finding the Weeping Gold to go with the Weeping Silver. And then the one in behind there from the 50s California pottery piece, unusual to find. Not sure who the maker is. I think possibly Lane. Those are all going to sell between about $25 and $45 depending on size. And then the microphone here, which I had the good fortune to pick for $25 in the Tri-Cities, is actually about an $85 mic. So now we're going to walk next door to my friend Susan from Michigan and Florida's space, and she's got some interesting things. She's got these Lloyd Loom wicker pieces. There's a sofa that was too big to get out of the trailer, but these pieces were done in the 1920s and 30s originally, and Lloyd's Loom wicker is very collectible because of the interesting coloration, the variation in color, the styles. It's not like your kind of typical white plastic wicker furniture that they make now, and so it is something that people seek out. I had a video that I did from an auction in Kentucky. They had a little wood top table that had the wicker sides. It turns out it was one of these, and I should have bought it. It went for $25, and this little table here, which is similar, is worth $175. So I missed out on that one. We all learn stuff in this business, and that's part of why I love it, because there's always something new. Afghans are becoming really popular again, and it's a little chilly for Florida here today, and so actually she sold almost all of them, but there's still this really cool blue puffy one here, and then a nice old stadium blanket in the front. Blankets and textiles like this are becoming really collectible, and not just old-fashioned quilts and things. People are really liking these 40s, 50s, 60s, even 70s pieces. Cute little modernist piece here with the buttresses outside. That's an interesting looking piece. That's an American modernist piece. And then she's got a bunch of Christmas. She, like a lot of dealers, saves up for this show, and so November and January and February extravaganzas are really great because the dealers from up north come and bring the things they've been holding all year for Florida market. And in this case it's ornaments, and she's got a bunch of vintage ones. There were 3 times as many, but boy, they've been selling. We've been very busy, actually. And then the cast iron bell. Hi, Susan. The cast iron bell is really cool, and she got a bunch of these up in Michigan and Ohio, and this is, I think, the last one she's got left. It's priced $225, and boy, they're There's a smaller one down there, she says, yep. And of course, one of the most popular things now are these ceramic trees made in the 1970s. They are a really big deal again. A lot of people are putting these up instead of putting up a big tree, and they just look so cool lit. And so she's got a really neat selection here, including this interesting sort of pearlescent one and some bigger ones. And they range anywhere from about $30 to $95 depending on the piece. And some can be even more expensive. They have music boxes in the bottom. There's a lot of variations on this theme, so pretty fun thing. You can collect a whole forest of them. A lot of big signage comes to Mount Dora as well, and that's really cool because it's getting harder to find. These are 1950s, 40s, 50s vintage pieces, the Reliance Art metal, and then the Williams Paint and Hardware double sign. Those are going to sell in the, I'm sure, $400 to $500 range. They're the large one at least. But this fellow mainly does a lot of nautical stuff. He gets ships' lanterns and really cool, like the glass fishing floats here, these really nice various block pulleys, and again, lanterns, buoys, porthole covers, all sorts of fish floats, and then coral. Coral is really cool to find. They've got the restrictions on it because they want to preserve the coral that's left. So the old pieces that have already been harvested are what we have, and so a lot of demand for this sort of thing for decoration, especially here in Florida. And then of course old surfboards too, oars, all that kind of stuff. So this is a really cool specialization, and he's saying I should take a look in the back. So let's go back there, and we're going to see a bunch of surfboards. Here we go. Yep, bunch of little boogie board style things. So yes, the nice thing is this is a big space, so we all get to bring extra backstock, and that's good because thousands of people come to this show every time, and so we need the extra stock. Then next to him is this person with a lot of true vintage, semi-antique and antique Persian rugs, big room-size pieces from the 1910s and 20s, area rugs, a lot of really beautiful patterns. A lot of these tribal patterns are not going to be produced anymore because of the wars in the Middle East, and so a lot of the rug makers have been driven into refugee camps, and as a result, they are sharing their patterns and their techniques, so the pure tribalism era is officially over. And so right now, because of the wars, there's a rather large supply, and so rugs are selling for a lot less than they used to. If you like them, it's a great time to buy them because someday people are going to catch on to that fact, and then the prices will escalate. I'm going to walk over here now and take a look at this booth. This is my neighbor Stefan. He is doing the show for the first time that I've seen him. He has these really great modernist stools, which I think I might need to take home if I can afford them. Not sure what his price is yet. He has a lot of French furniture, and that's his specialty. This armoire, if it's French, it is an armoire. This is a nice country piece with the carving. He's got some good oak pieces, and then this is a very, very old piece here. You can tell by the construction and the hardware that this piece has significant age. Nice big console. Another wardrobe here. And again, one nice thing about the Florida market is we see a lot of antique pieces that come from other parts of the world besides what we're used to seeing in the United States. So it really makes it fun and interesting in a way that a lot of shows can't compete with. It's one fun thing about Renningers is everything is vintage. Even the beer trailer is vintage, which I love. It's right out of the 50s with a little bit of an updated paint job perhaps. And here's a look down the hill into the vast fields where there are another 1,000 dealers. You see a bunch of architectural pieces here. A lot of this is salvage, and then they actually add some new panels to it to make them functional. And then of course there's all of these dealers, and then way up the hill is that flea market part on the other side of the road. So this is a gigantic market. If you are thinking of traveling to Florida for fun and you like antiques and vintage, this is a really cool reason to come down here. Thanks for joining me again in the fun and fascinating antique community here where online meets the real world. Please click the subscribe button below. Click the bell to be notified when new videos upload. Leave a comment below and hit thumbs up to like this video. Links to our online social media daily posts and our items for sale are in the description. This is George at the Antique Nomad. Bye for now.